to episode 4 of the Ben and Ryan Show. We've been working on our opening. We were rocking out last time, and you guys learned that we've been progressing every week, and so we had to go in with the extra crazy hair. So
I don't think that's hair, Ryan.
Or crazy palm. I went through my kids' toy chest and looked for some like wig or something. I couldn't find it, so I went with a pom. It's kind of punky hair. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the Ben and Ryan Show, guys.
Welcome.
Welcome. This week we are joined by the Mark Takata.
Me. Hey,
Watermelon.
What's up, everyone? I know I've got the watermelon effect going over here. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Very excited to have you.
Mark is Senior Technical Evangelist, Adobe ColdFusion. We already, if you want to hear Mark and I riff about his title, and I think we even talk about how long it can get and some random things, I will put a note in the show notes, or a link in the show notes to one of our previous podcasts we did together. It was a lot of fun. Very similar, kind of just went off on topics. But today we're going to be talking about Adobe ColdFusion 2025. And we're going to be talking about just evangelism in the ColdFusion space. So, Mark, welcome to the show. And of course, we also all know Ben. He is our principal engineer. We should record our pre-show.
Just a quick question. Are there junior technical evangelists? Do you have minions at your disposal?
Oh, gosh, I wish I did. Oh, that would be so wonderful. I dress them all alike. It would be amazing. No, there are not. There's different levels of evangelists.
Yeah, of course. I just didn't know if you had a actual like a group working under you.
I don't. I
should get on that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We do have. There's one. It's not in ColdFusion, obviously. For ALM. The director of evangelism.
For our listeners, ALM is what?
Oh, I'm sorry. Adobe Learning Manager, which is one of the products that's in my same group with. So I'm part of an evangelism team that does Captivate, Connect, ColdFusion, and Adobe Learning Manager. They actually have two evangelists. One is actually the director of all of us, and then they have a full-time dedicated person as well, who just joined us, Justin Seeley, who's an amazing evangelist. I actually learned how to do things in Illustrator like 12 years ago on his YouTube channel, and now I hang out with him every week. So pretty cool. Small world too.
Very cool.
Very cool. So more actually, before we get started, I do want to put one little note here. We do want to thank our sponsors, xByte Cloud. They do come in. They do all of our post-production for us, the team there. So if you need any cloud, please go check them out. And now that we got that out of the way, we can go into the fun stuff. Woo-hoo. So Mark,
Ryan,
we got. I know we're very formal here. You can tell by the pom. 2025 coming out here. We got beta coming out. I'm sure you're excited about beta. Yeah. Can you give us some of your highlights of 2025 and talk to us about the beta program?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to. So 2025 is going to be a really interesting release for us. There's a lot under the hood, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge from a marketing perspective to really like highlight the stuff, because it's like, inside your engine, like the cylinder walls are now coated with a stronger material or something.
Better.
Right? It just works better, right? Like 15.7% improvement and whatever, right? So there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of administrative stuff that runs better, performance is better, but none of that is like, spoilers and pinstriping and shiny stuff, right? There are definitely those things. I'm super excited about the charting. The charting is getting a big upgrade, including something called theming, which you may or may not have seen Sharvy demonstrate. We hired an amazing team to come in and do some demo themes for us, and goodness, it's the best ColdFusion charts I've ever seen in my life. Nice. So out of the box, Like you guys get all that out of the box. Plus, you can make your own stuff as well. So that's fun. The spreadsheet stuff is super fun. There's a lot of really kind of like difficult to demo, but really powerful things like SSO through Microsoft MS Graph. There's a lot of cool Docker stuff coming. So it's a little bit tough to go in and be like, oh, okay, let me show you how I create a swarm and do secrets and then attach that to a central like logging. Like, okay, well, I have to have all of those things running and then be able to demo them all on one screen. So it's a little bit tough, but we actually will be having demos. So one thing I did want to announce about the beta program, which is coming really, really soon, like, oh gosh, weeks away.
Do we have a date? Are you announcing a date?
I don't want to do that because it means that I have to deliver my code on that date. So I'd rather have just a teeny weeny bit, but like 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Probably look closer to the
1
week.
Wow.
Yeah, it's coming. It's right there. So something that we're doing this year is we're really focusing on feature specific beta testing. So we're going to have, specific areas that you'll be testing the charting, the SSO and whatever. We are having webinars for every single one of those with a deep dive prior to this stuff landing. Okay. So right at the beginning of beta, the engineers who built the thing will be doing an hour-long deep dive into just the thing.
Oh, very cool.
And any beta, for anyone who's in beta, it's going to be an open beta. So anyone who wants to join can. And there will be information on where to sign up for that coming up pretty soon. And at the very beginning of it, I will be going through and doing an overview of all of the different features. So if you see something interesting, then make sure that you get in on the beta, go and do your testing, because the best bugs or questions or enhancement requests every week win a prize.
It's like a bug bounty.
It's like the bug bounty. We're doing that for the first time. We used to do that a lot way back in the day. And we stopped doing it for a variety of reasons. Mostly we just didn't have the staff to support it. We're back up to full strength and we're ready to go at it hard again. We want this to be the most stable and feature-rich release as possible. So definitely get in there. If there's anything of interest, get in there and do what you can with it. It's pretty easy to install. You can just install it on your local machine. It works fine. You get the full install, by the way. You get the full enterprise install. There's no fluffing around with stuff. There's it'll die a horrible death a few months down the line, but in the meantime,
let me ask. Let me put Ryan on the spot here for a second, because it's one thing to take a beta piece of software and build little hello worlds and try some new things. It's another to install, say, ColdFusion 2023 side by side with the 2025 beta and just point the home directory to a different place. Is that a kind of beta program that xByte would ever consider participating in? I know you probably don't want to have to support things that are not quote unquote production ready, but I think we could, as a community, find bugs more readily. I know you're a very enterprise focused company, so I'm sure, huge enterprise companies are not going to be like, oh yeah, let's just try running this on 2025 beta, but smaller
but
people might want to do that.
And I would say a lot of our customers are also they're developers for big companies, so they have like little side hustles they do.
Yeah.
And so they do straddle that. And work game. I mean, if it'd be something we have to work with Adobe on, because I think there's some licensing restrictions on.
There's contractual and NDA restrictions. I can sort of cover that a tiny bit at the risk of getting nuked from orbit by legal. If you are a member of the,
did I just end 2 jobs in one sentence?
You may have. That's right. You're hiring though, right? So if you are part of the beta program, so if you are an individual that's part of the beta program, you sign the NDA, and you also have a server that you have access to wherever, doesn't matter, VD3, xByte, your mom's house under the kitchen table. You are free to install that and run non-production loads on it. That's literally what this is about, right?
Gotcha.
So if you have a EC2 instance on the cloud, as long as you're not violating the things that you sign, don't put anything important on it, right? So that side of things works just fine, right? Having xByte actually provide the stuff gets problematic, because then they're acting as a representative of Adobe.
Gotcha. All right, that's fair. That's fair.
So you got to be a little bit careful. It's been something I've been juggling internally and doing some work with, and trying to figure out a way to actually make it, just available for everyone everywhere, where companies could spin things up that way. But it's been just the legal issues with it being a literal pre-release thing. They're super tight on it for good reason, right? Because what happens if that pre-release thing has a bug and then that causes some sort of release of information accidentally, right? Who's at fault? It just gets really ugly really fast. So sure. I get it, lawyers gonna lawyer. But as I said, I mean, there's nothing stopping someone that's part of the beta program from installing that on wherever they're going to install it. Right?
So for all of our customers, we will support it from beta on. So there's no worries that we will assist them if they want to test it out and be part of the beta program. We're always there to support that.
And I will say the only publicly accessible ColdFusion 2025 server that I am aware of in the world is running on xByte currently.
Nice.
So I can't share details of that, but that was a little project that we did for CF Summit, and so they are already comfortable with it. But to extend that, so are all the other third-party partners. They're all part of the beta program. They're all deeply involved in helping to develop it, testing it, making sure that it works on their servers, right? So all these guys are capable of doing it. So pick your poison. Now, I don't know if they have pom-poms on their heads, though. So,
I mean, true, very true, right. The truth.
So beta's coming. Beta will be in two parts. I need to sort of add that. The first part will release about 3/4 of the features, and that I believe that release actually is supposed to happen around December 1st. Now that I'm thinking about. Right? 1 month later, the second release will come, and that will be much more deeply integrated features like Docker, the Docker Swarm stuff, the sort of deep reporting stuff, right? Like this, the more complicated stuff. Some of the shinier things are launching early. That said, theming is in part 2. Because it's actually really complicated to make that work in a ColdFusion-y way. Mm-hmm. You could do it right now in JavaScript if you wanted to, but who wants to do that?
Is the reason for the 2-part because of a delayed alpha on that stuff, or is it just to split up the beta?
It's for two things. We want to get as much feedback as possible, so we wanted to release as much as possible, as early as possible, right? So if we just waited until January, that's a whole month's worth of feedback that we could be getting during the time of year where, quite frankly, a lot of people are they're just sitting twiddling their thumbs, right? A lot of people have the time off, and I mean, come on, let's be serious. None of us have lives outside of ColdFusion.
Zero.
Of course, we're going to sit at home and well, we have friends, but they do ColdFusion too. And we're all going to be like, hey, let's try out this cool new language feature. Let's do this, right? And I'm sort of joking, but honestly, that's actually we've seen that when we do betas during that period of time, that's when we get the vast majority of feedback, because people are just sitting there. They have time.
Of course. I mean, you have no idea how many work emergencies I've had during family holidays. I was like, I gotta go. I just got paged. I'll be for a couple of hours.
I would love to talk to you about your stuffing recipe, Jim. But wow, no, something's on fire somewhere.
Hey, let me ask a licensing question, just because we sort of touched on it before, but I know that there are, this is very generic. I know that there is a standard and an enterprise license with ColdFusion, Adobe ColdFusion, but I also know that a lot of that is abstracted away by the hosting partners like xByte. If I go and I get ColdFusion via xByte, is it always enterprise, or is there a standard?
Yes.
Okay, so that's part of the deal. So when we talk about these things, and I don't know any of the breakdown here, but if you were to say, oh, but charting and theming is only an enterprise license, you would still get that in something like an xByte offering.
Absolutely, yeah. Anything that you're going to find at any of anything in the cloud, honestly, whether it's an AMI, whether it's through a third-party partner, whatever that thing is going to be, it's going to be enterprise. If it's a war install, it's always going to be enterprise. Wars are not supported on the lower stuff. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like the differences between standard and enterprise are this like weird amorphous fuzzy thing that I personally don't like because it confuses the heck out of people. Right.
Yeah.
And as the prices come down with things like subscriptions and stuff, it makes less and less sense to have this weird separation anymore. Right. Like why have it?
Is this a foreshadowing?
No, it's not. This is me just sort of rapping about stuff.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure it's being talked about somewhere that like at some point that there's just no good reasoning behind it other than it's cheaper, right? But again, like you can get VPSs for very little money, right? You can get shared hosting for very little money. You can get AMIs that you can turn off. Like at some point, it just becomes sort of moot, and especially since you can't just buy the box, you're not going to be able to buy the box anymore, right? We're all going to school. So we announced that.
Yeah, on that point, to the foreshadowing, pricing regardless, you were saying at CF Summit that ColdFusion is moving. It's the last product in the Adobe suite to move from an annual purchase to a subscription purchase.
I mean, possibly in the software space in general.
Yeah, it's not very. Yeah, it's going from perpetual to an annual subscription.
Yeah, perpetual.
But I do want to point this out because I get this all the time, and people freak out like, oh my god, like all this stuff. That space that we call that retail, which is like literally Ryan goes, I'm going to take my credit card and go to adobe.com and I'm going to go ahead and buy myself a license of ColdFusion to run my whatever pom-pom store on, right? That space is so tiny. It's so narrow.
Right. It's a rounding error on the
it is. There's very few people that sit there and throw cards at perpetual products like that. The vast majority of our customers are ETLA. The T in ETLA is term, which is a type of subscription already. We have been on a subscription which has an endpoint, which is what an ETLA is, for years. And it's the most popular way to get it. You get support built in, you get all this other stuff like as part of that. And so it's almost like that other side is more aligning with that. It's just that part of our ColdFusion business was the odd man out. That was we were the weird guys at Adobe where we still sold boxes. So not literal boxes, because I would have a whole stack.
But the subscription model is exciting. I mean, forgive me if I'm taking words out of your mouth here, but as it was expressed at the CF Summit conference, one of the things that the perpetual license has sort of held you guys back from is releasing updates more often, because you have to make the purchase more delectable for the consumer, right? So if people are subscribing, you don't have that high a bar anymore. If you were to slip in the bathroom and hit your head on the toilet seat and have a vision for some new feature, you wouldn't necessarily have to wait 2 years.
That literally happens all the time.
Yeah.
And to be clear, also, like we've known this was coming for a long time. I mean, Adobe's been in our ear for a really long time about like, listen, you guys need to stop doing this, because we're going to literally stop supporting your ability to do it, which is what happened, right? They just said like, you don't get that toy anymore. Go play with a different toy. And so moving, before it used to be about 2 to 2.5 years between releases, as you were saying, we were trying to move more to a yearly release cycle with the idea that we wanted to do that before the subscriptions became sort of like mandatory. We didn't quite get there. We went to a 1.5 years, but the idea is the more that we can release, the more interest will be in the product, but also the higher value you get, right? Like, I don't want to have to wait every year. It makes no sense to just keep like, oh, well, let's hold back for this particular thing. And it makes it easier to add in, because if you think about it, product managers, which of course Sharvi will be your guest here in a few weeks, and she can go more into depth here. If you have a product feature roadmap for, let's say, 2026, if you were doing this in a perpetual way, right? You have to have the big stuff and the little stuff all in the same box, right? But why? If you have the little stuff done, test it, ship it. Give it, give it to your current customers. Get them excited. Let's keep going, right? Yeah, give me, right? And then the big stuff can maybe be a little bit further apart because there's more testing, right? It may have bigger impacts and changes on your stuff, but it gives us the flexibility to do that. And I think that's more aligned with like literally everyone else in the space, right? It just makes sense. And I know there's a whole subset of humanity that I don't care. I could sit here and tap dance and do whatever and juggle flaming chainsaws all day long, and they will still hate subscriptions. I don't. I love them. Like CC, I've been using CC since day one because it allowed me to legally use Photoshop, which I've been using since I was like 16 or whatever. Like, and I'm not going to go into depth on what that means. As legal issues, but it was so exciting for me. Not only do I get that, I got Illustrator, I got I got all of the other products that come with it. Dreamweaver, what?
I used to install Creative Suite 6. I won it in I don't know, some sort of competition. I won a copy of Creative Suite 6, I think, and it was the last version to include Fireworks, which was an imaging editing program acquired from Macromedia. And I installed it until literally I hit a version of Mac that just wouldn't allow me to install Creative Suite 6 anymore. And I was like, Fireworks.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's I could tell you it's the Flash. The Flash. Eventually Macs just started blocking anything that had anything to do with Flash. And then that was the end of it. But so I think aligning with that makes sense for us. And we're still weird, right? Like there's not really an installable server product that's well known anyway. There are other installable server products though. I don't know if you know this FrameMaker server.
Can you expand on that though? When you say there's not an installable server product, I don't know if I understand
Adobe,
what you mean.
Yeah, from Adobe. So think about what Adobe sells. So they sell things like Photoshop, which is an end user tool.
Right.
Right. It's like selling someone a car. You buy the car, you use the car for yourself to do things and go street racing, knowing you
Too fast, too furious. I get it.
Too fast, too furious. We're like a bus. We're a bus that you then use to go service other people, right? Like very few people just install ColdFusion and make themselves an app that they just use themselves. I mean, I'm sure they exist. And we love you because you're paying a lot for doing that. But you use it to then build applications which are purchased or used by other people. That changes a lot of the way that things work. Like think about AI. If you have Photoshop and it has AI in it, the person who bought Photoshop is the person using the AI,
right?
1-to-1, right? If you have ColdFusion and I build an app, I might have 10 users, I might have 1 million users. So if we build AI in, we don't know what those costs are going to be unless we pass them through, which has been an issue. So things like that, having to install it on a wide range of different server products also is another challenge, right? Like how many Linux boxes do you think Photoshop runs on? Right. That's just not happening. How many Linux boxes does ColdFusion run on? Like an infinite number. Like that's one of our largest install bases. They run on Macs. They run on Windows. They run on everything, right, in the cloud. So that means that from our side, we have to do an incredibly large amount of highly complex regression testing and all that stuff these guys don't really have to worry about, but that takes time between releases, right? Every time Tomcat changes, people drink way more. And we've, by the way, to give some seriously big props to the ColdFusion engineering team and the engineering quality assurance team, they went from it taking approximately 6 weeks from Tomcat changing and us installing it, having to do all of the regression testing all the way down to less than a week.
Holy cow!
Yeah. They really they did some unbelievably amazing automation work. Their code coverage is huge. Like they had efficiency increases across the board. These guys rocked it. They were telling me 2 years ago that it would be absolutely impossible to follow the main branch updates of Tomcat because it just took too long. Like in between the start of regression testing and the end, there would be like 2 or 3 releases back then. Now we're way more, not to say that we're going to do that, but we're way more aligned if there is a big, like, showstopper Tomcat fix, a CVE that's just like a blockbuster. We can get in there and do it and not worry that it's going to take 2.5 months or something between start and end. Like we can, drop it, get it done, get it tested, feel safe, and then push it out there as a patch or a hotfix or whatever needs to be done. So
amazing.
Yeah. But again, not something these guys have experience with on the other sides of, or AEM, right? Like, or the advertising cloud. Like none of these guys have the same problems that we do, which is why we were the last ones on the bus.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So 2025 beta coming out. We didn't mention this. There is a webinar from Karasoft. I'll put a link in the show notes about this. It's coming up on November 19th. And so you can sign up for that if you want to know all the features. And then we'll also, as Marky mentioned a couple of times, Charby will be on our show. It'll be recorded here in a couple of weeks, and we'll figure out when it launches, probably a couple of days after that. So probably right around the time of the beta, or maybe a week after, you'll see our show drop, where she will go into some of that.
That'll be nice too. And I've mentioned a few of the features here. Charby will deep dive into kind of a lot of what that means. I'm sure she'll have a demo.
Do you have one standout feature, which is like people will be running to 2025?
I can tell you my absolutely favorite feature, which the CVE read write process stuff.
The CSV.
CSV, CVE, yeah.
I was gonna say the same thing. I'm so excited about that.
No. CSV. I have written by hand so many stupid parsers for CSVs in my life. Like I was just ready to flip a table, and this one, it's just like, what do you want it in? You want it in the query? Bam! Like. It's so pretty and so useful. Like it's an immediate upgrade. Like I can think of dozens and dozens of apps where I could just rip out, pages of code, and then it's like, a couple lines.
What's funny? I feel like as an industry, we keep trying to fight the fact that text is like the perfect interchange format.
Yeah.
And it gets very poo-pooed as this old idea, like, oh, we were doing CSVs back in the 90s. Like that can't possibly be what we should still be using. And yet I feel like it's time to just accept the fact that it's amazingly easy to use and it's super powerful and it compresses really well. And it's just amazing.
Well, my favorite thing is like people are like, why are you using comma separated values, man? Like why would you use that? I'm like, all right, well, what are you going to use? JSON. Really?
I feel like if you're as long as financial software is generating CSVs, the world will continue to run on CSVs.
Well, and there's this like feeling as a developer that anything that has to do with Excel is somehow evil. I feel that like so many people just get like angry, like, what? You do all of your work on Excel? What are you doing? You're going to kill your business. It's like, well, I mean, yes, maybe, but we're a $2.5 billion company and we're doing pretty good right now. Right.
Yeah,
So,
Excel's pretty powerful.
It's incredible. Right.
Yeah.
And it's being able to work alongside it and integrate with it is a much better, because we're not going to beat it at this point. No, like I think we should just sort of wave the white flag and be like, yep, let's work together, guys. Because
absolutely.
You know what's crazy though is, so going to Excel just for a second.
Yeah.
I'm an Excel geek. I play around with it a lot. My CF Summit presentation, I actually gave a bunch of Excel tips as I was going through some of the information. But when you try and save a file as a CSV file, you've got to scroll through. There are some not standard CSV formats that are higher on the list than your standard CSV.
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't that be like underneath Excel format? Like, it should be Excel, standard CSV, and then like all the rest of the stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing that drives me crazy. I know that marketing is always not the most straightforward craft. But there's one product that I always hear advertised on podcasts. It's like a SaaS product where all they do is parse CSVs for you and give you, I guess, a normalized data set. And they talk about how parsing CSV is like, oh, it's such dirty data and it's garbage most of the time and it's poorly formatted. And I always think to myself, but CSV is a format. Like, you can't just throw text in a file and call it a CSV. Like, it has to, the whole point is that it follows a format. Who's generating badly formatted CSVs? I never quite understood.
If it's not normalized, I mean, that's like complaining that a database is not normalized and then blaming the fact that it's in SQL or something. Like no, like, fix your stuff. Like, don't suck.
Yeah, I think with that, it's where they'll put in like longer descriptions, which with breaks in it, and that'll, if not done right, that'll break your the CSV
and escape characters and there's a lot of things that CSVs have as limits, but every
you can escape. There's an escape for something.
There's ways around it, and part of being a good developer is understanding how to work within the context that you're in, the constraints of the system that you're working with, right? Exactly the same with CSVs. Like, you can make CSVs do amazing things. You just have to know what you're doing.
So this was your favorite feature.
Yeah.
So for those who have not seen any of these webinars yet, and so they can relate to this and get your excitement, what does it? What's the big what's been enhanced with this way it handles CSVs?
Okay, so what's been enhanced is that it didn't used to handle them. So back in the day, if you were dealing with spreadsheets, you would import an Excel and then be able to deal with it. It didn't really recognize CSV as a spreadsheet because, spoiler alert, it's not, right? Like, when you pull it into Excel, it looks like a spreadsheet, but it's not. It's a text-based normalized format, right? But now there are actual built-in functions that you can say, okay, here's a CSV, and you can put in like, here's the escape characters, here's what the actual separation value character is. There's all kinds of different things that you can put in to make sure that you don't get junk data back or whatever. And then you could say, give it to me in like 7 different types of formats, whether that's an array of structs, a query, right? You can pull back exactly what you need so that you don't have to do all of the, jumping through hoops that you used to be able to do. And to that fact, I have used so many of Ben's blogs to take this stuff and parse it and then loop through the parsed stuff and then put that into an array and jump through all these hoops. You don't have to do that anymore.
Plus, I think one of the things that Sharby was saying, if I recall correctly, is that it uses a streaming model under the hood. So if you have a 4 gigabyte CSV export from some system, you're not loading 4 gigabytes of text into memory to parse it. You're doing some sort of, file line read or something.
That's my second favorite.
Tweet.
That's my second favorite feature. So the streaming. So there's two other like big spreadsheet things. One is the streaming, and that actually came from a good friend of mine who works for the federal government, and their financial Excel spreadsheets are enormous. Just, I mean, ridiculously huge Excel spreadsheets. When they try to process them, it kills the server. Basically, like they literally cannot do it. No matter how big they make the server, it doesn't work, right? So what they were doing was they were chunking themselves, right? They put in a hack where they would just chunk it, process the chunks, and then put them all back together. So we added a feature where essentially you have a memory frame, and you stream into the memory frame, you do whatever you need to do, and then you pass that to wherever you need to pass it. If you're writing back to another Excel, then it writes back to that Excel. If you're putting that into a database, it puts it into a database. Whatever you want to do inside of that frame, that is also available as an asynchronous processing thing. So if you want to send that off, if you don't want it to be blocking, you can send that off and run it in the background and have an async thread handle it as well. So really cool stuff. A little hard to demo again. Like I swear it's working. It's in the back. But it does work. It's funny too when we talk about performance improvements. That's one of my favorite things because it's like, okay, to process this in the past was infinite because it wouldn't work. To do it now is 25 seconds, right? Like. Because you're able to actually like run through it and efficiently do it. What would happen is it would just clog. It would clog the memory, and then everything else that needed memory to do anything just wouldn't have it, and eventually something would time out. Boom. So now you can.
So for those selling server resources, we do not appreciate your improvements in efficiency.
Stop running your business on Excel.
Ryan, I will schedule about an hour next week to worry about that problem.
All right, so we had 2025.
Yeah,
we talked about all the licensing. We talked about licensing changes and the lack of really impact of that. Options out there. Your favorite features, great to hear, and we'll have to then pepper Sharvy with questions. Now going on to evangelism. This is a topic that you talked about at the summit, and we've been doing. Ben and I, we talked about some of our favorite presentations. We got a chance to talk with Justin Scott, one of our favorite presenters, talking about cryptography a couple weeks ago. We're talking about script Mark because both Ben and I, one of our favorite presentations was your topic on evangelism.
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And some interesting things you talk about. I maybe spring on this. You don't know if you had a chance to prep your summit presentation for a second time, but you talked about the battle cards and okay, hey, what people say. As I said, okay, hey, like ColdFusion is not being innovated. When of course it is being innovated and all that, and even okay, hey, one of the parts that stood out in my mind was the replacing of CF. So hey, when people talk about okay, your expression of burning down the house,
right?
Okay, hey, my website's on CF, but it's 10 years old. You know what? That's old. Let's just we'll replace everything when you don't need to. When really it's the front end that may just need. I mean, it's been 10 years old. You should do it anyway.
Right.
Get a new website. But can you kind of go into some of that burning down the house and that part of that presentation?
One of my favorite songs, by the way, which I won't sing right now because, frankly, there's laws against that. Yeah. So something that I like to bring up, which is obvious to most developers, is that like your 10-year-old code will be awful no matter what language it's in. Right.
Fact.
Your 5-year-old code. Like if you're not just a little tiny bit or more embarrassed about code you wrote a year ago, you're not growing as a developer, and you should probably take a desk job at that point and do other things. Honestly, I mean that's mean a little bit, but that's the honest to God truth. The movement and speed with which the application development industry just flies is so fast that you're always going to have improvements. Plus, it's a practiced thing, right? Like, you are always getting better, so your code is always getting better. You should be continually working on refactoring, improving, moving to, maybe new, more efficient methods. And the problem is that somewhere along the line, and this isn't just a problem with CF, I've seen plenty of it in every single language out there, that stopped happening. Whether that developer moved or they figured something was done, which it ain't done until you Control-A delete it, and maybe not even then. And then that sat and it rotted. And that's what code does. It sits there and rots, no matter how good, right? Even if it's Ben's code.
No, I'm so embarrassed by some of my old code. It's awful.
It's amazing. It's because
I'm going to go ahead and let me see if I can do this here. I'm going to try and share the screen. This is a screenshot I took of it. Let's see. And speaking of being embarrassed on the apps that you use for things, I took a screenshot. I put into Paint here for everybody.
Paint. Excellent. Is it Paint 3D?
That's going away.
Oh, what?
I know. I think this month.
Disappointed noise.
So I should be using an Adobe product. I do apologize that I'm using Paint here.
Brutal.
So here's a screenshot. Oh, you know what? No one can see it.
I can see it.
There we go.
Oh, look at that! Burning down the house, refactoring costs. Yeah,
it's much funner. It's much more funner, much funnest. Yeah. It's funnier, but anyway, it's more fun to laugh at me when you actually can see the paint. So there we go. That's the formalness of the Ben and Ryan show on full display here.
There you go. Yeah, this is all great. I don't know who made this. This looks excellent. All points there are very solid. No, I mean, and all of these things are important to think about, right? So the costs, obviously, breaking things down. And I've seen this number 2 point. I don't think I spent much time during the talk because there was a lot of info and it went for a while. But I think people don't realize that, especially with an older app, right? So let's say you have an app and it's, maybe it's a top-down procedural. All the logic is in the pages. Awful architecture. It probably works and it probably makes you money, or else you wouldn't care about working on it, right? But if you just take that and just directly convert it, well, it's still awful. I don't care what language it's in. Like, oh, it's in Rust. Yeah, okay, that's great. Good job. Here's your latte. But like, it's still bad. But then if you convert that to a modern architecture, right, object-oriented, all the fun stuff, well, there's a risk you're going to miss something because every page is doing something. It might look like it's doing the same thing, but maybe there's a slight difference, right? So there is a risk, and the risk gets higher if you're moving into a different language because maybe they don't have that particular function, right? Maybe that works in a different way. Maybe caching works differently. There's like a million different things that could be different. So there's a risk even in just converting it in CF, but the further away you get from CF, the worse it is. Plus, it takes longer, so you have less time to fix it when it inevitably breaks. So,
I keep coming back to a quote from a presentation, and I wish I could remember who quoted this. But this was relating more to the monolith versus microservices architectural debates. And there was a slide, I think it's very famous at this point, that says something to the effect of, if you couldn't do a monolith correctly, what made you think you could do microservices correctly? And this to me feels very much on point with that. Like, if you can't maintain a ColdFusion app, even if it's old, what makes you think that converting it is going to work well for you? I mean, like, right. What makes you think you're going to understand all of the little business logic edge cases in the code that exists and is working today? And you have the chutzpah to think that you can then translate that into a different language, one that you're probably not that well versed in anyway, because that just seems to be the arc of the technology world.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ben, I've actually done this, so I'm not proud. I've been hired in the past to convert ColdFusion to a different language, and literally for someone who at that point had been doing ColdFusion for 20 something years, right? It was hard. It was hard for me having, basically encyclopedic knowledge of what CF was doing and a damn whole lot of C# experience. That was still a brutal process moving that over. And honestly, that company still exists, and they are 50% still to this day ColdFusion. Guess which side of the house is growing? The CF shop side is actually growing because it's more efficient to work on that side. That is the side of the house that actually is like the ROI is worth putting people in. They just certified their architect so that he could go and work on that side of things. Like, yeah, it's it's much easier to be an evangelist when your product is awesome.
I think people underestimate also the amount of weird logic that accumulates in an application over time. They say it was like no plan meets first contact with the enemy. None of your software designs survive first contact with the customer. They're going to find crazy stuff that they need your software to do. And someone has to build that into some weird little if statement that's, 7 function calls deep. And when you're translating that into a different language, it's so easy to miss that stuff.
It is. It absolutely is. And I mean, and that's not even, like, and you're talking about like horrifically breaking code too. Like sometimes the difference is that your performance goes down by 500% because switch statements work differently in a different language or something, right? Like there are these subtleties, and one is not going to break you, but your app doesn't have one. Your app has thousands of those.
I want a quick tangent here for a second, as we do on the show. I was listening to an episode, I can't remember what podcast it was, but they were talking all about breaking changes and how the concept of breaking changes is so much deeper than people often think about it. A lot of times it's talked about in the context of SEMver, semantic versioning. And, you go from a version 1 to a version 2, you can expect things to break. But this one guy laid out this, he articulated a case I thought was very well put, that he had, he was building some piece of software. It was a library that people could use. And it did something very complex, it abstracted some very complex workflow. And he said that at one point he came up with an idea that could make it much, much faster than how it was working today, but it would consume like 10 times as much memory. And he said, people have built an application expecting a certain CPU and RAM utilization profile. And even if the API itself does not break, I can't suddenly release a piece of software that will eat up everyone's memory unexpectedly. So it's not a breaking change in a traditional sense, but it is a breaking change in a practical sense. And
that's a really good point.
I forget why I even went on that tangent.
No, I mean, because that happens, right? I mean, that happens. There are tangential, there are adjacent things. Like we have to worry about stuff that isn't even ColdFusion breaking, honestly, right? Like we have to worry about the things that are running alongside ColdFusion breaking sometimes. We rely on so many things. We rely on OEM third-party libraries. We rely on Java, which, traditionally never breaks. Right? So, and then, then Oracle decides that they're just going to go on a binge drinking thing and remove all reflection from Java. And then like, oh, great. We'll not put to sleep for the next 3 months. Like stuff happens, right? And then of course that has the downstream effect of, we didn't make that breaking change. That was a completely other company. But now suddenly all of our partners, all our library, the people that build libraries to work inside of CF, now all their stuff stops working or it gets incredibly inefficient or whatever happens, right? And it's just like, oh my God. So yeah, it's complex.
I had a funny licensing issue years ago. So ColdFusion, as many people know, does PDF generation, and under the hood, I don't know what it uses today, but at the time it used, I think it was a product called JPedal. I think, I don't know, I could be misremembering.
A long time ago.
Yeah. I think this was version 9 or 10. And I was trying to get something to work, and I could get something to work if I actually instantiated the JPedal jar file directly, like reached right into the lib directory and did it.
Mhm.
And I was running into a bug, so I reached out to, I think it was JPedal, forgive me if it's not, to their support
never do
company.
that.
And I said, hey, I'm having trouble getting this done. Is there better documentation about this? And their response was, you have violated your Adobe ColdFusion license agreement. Please stop what you're doing immediately.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that the libraries, the third-party libraries, were under some sort of special licensing agreement with Adobe. That was completely a black box to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you read your EULA, then
it's only 117 pages,
right? It's a little light reading in the evenings if you need to fall asleep. Yeah, no, that still exists to this day. Our libraries are under a fairly tight, lockdown of usage, primarily because if they weren't, then ColdFusion would cost $250,000 a license or something crazy, right?
So thank you for doing that.
which is good. I mean, even we were just talking about Java, like you get to use the Java engine. That's $100,000 or something. Like if you just wanted to go out and like license the Java engine to build applications on top of on an enterprise level, it's six figures. Like
Nice.
it's ridiculous, right? And so you get that built in, but with that you have limits that are in the EULA that you can't just like, oh, I'm just going to build a bunch of other stuff that runs on this Java. Like it's got to be a ColdFusion app. You can't you can't like build other things on top of it. But yeah, sometimes you get into weird places like oh shoot, what's that company? EXTJS or something like that.
Yeah,
was having a little bit of a moment. They were in their feelings about needing money, I guess, or something, and they were actually calling out to ColdFusion customers saying that they were violating their licenses by having their things out there, and we had to have a chat with them and tell them, no, here's the contract that we have with you that allows them to use this. And they're like, oh well, we didn't know it's a ColdFusion app, right? Because you can't tell sometimes. There isn't a .cfm, right? All you see is that if you go into the code,
yeah,
there's an include for EXTJS, and they checked their stuff, and this website wasn't on their list, so they decided to get handsy with them. And
EXTJS for younger listeners is a client-side user interface development library.
Right. It's what React is, except without having become very successful. There's a fun story back then. So people actually asked me, like, why would you use EXTJS? At the time, we didn't know what React was or Angular. I mean, they were
This
around.
was pre-React, I'm almost certain.
I think maybe a 0.9 version was out, right? Like there were other things around. I mean, I think Mustache was around, and some other stuff, but EXT was good. Like they had good stuff at the time. It was very early, right? They didn't have the concepts that they have now, and so that was the one we picked, and we licensed it.
EXTJS, from my memory, felt like it was enterprise oriented. Like it was designed to build robust, rich apps, not just like fun interactive things. And
right.
ColdFusion has always had very much an enterprise slant to it.
Well, and EXT also, they aligned really well with ColdFusion in that they had a little bit of a black boxy way of doing a few things, right? And that just aligned with the way that we were doing things at the time. With the information that we had, it was an excellent choice. But we maybe backed the wrong horse on that one. And now it's scared us. Like now we don't really want to do that again. Even though at this point I think it's pretty clear, who the winners are, and who's going to continue to win in the future. Of course, new libraries will appear. But
well, if I can double down on what you're saying for a second, because this was something you brought up in your evangelist talk. and I think this gets painted in a poor light a lot in our technology communities, which is that when a huge company like an Adobe or a Google or a Facebook or a Microsoft, when they are the ones backing a product, it is often painted with this, well, now you're under the agenda of whatever that company wants to do, and they're the ones, deciding which features go in and out. But when we look at all of the frameworks, at least on the front end, that have been the most successful, they have been the ones that are backed by these massive companies. And I don't think I've really thought about it. Yeah, I haven't thought about it super deeply, but you mentioned that in your talk, that you don't just get ColdFusion, you get, as you put it in the call or in the presentation, a number to call when there's a problem. And you don't get that when it's some guy in Wisconsin that's maintaining a front end library. And I don't know, that's very compelling, I think.
There's value there, honestly, and it has been stated very explicitly to me on multiple calls from these companies that, for whatever faults they may find with ColdFusion, they love the fact that they can pick up the phone or can get me on Teams and not just talk to me, as pleasant as I am, but have me pass them on to like the owner of that particular, like the engineer who wrote that. Yeah. And that they can deep dive into it, and they'll be like, oh, you're doing this. Oh, we didn't think that's an interesting use case. Like that never came up before. Hold on, let me figure out how we can make that. And we've shipped patches, and it
that was surprising to me. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we totally do that. And it's a little problematic because we have to be careful, right? That those patches don't get kind of out of the they don't get uninstalled and they don't get in the way of other things, right?
Sorry, just for the listeners' clarity, when Mark says they ship patches, he's not referring to the hot fixes that everyone gets. You're saying,
private.
Some Acme Inc. that's spending a very special amount of money, they can call up and say, hey, something's not working, and Adobe will literally create custom code for them.
Correct.
That's amazing. I mean, that's great.
We've definitely done that, and you're right. I mean, it's often the bigger customers that get that. However, it's sort of a it's a self-selecting group, because those people are often the ones that have these enormous server farms, hundreds and hundreds.
It's like first class in a plane. Like the people who buy first class and business class are subsidizing essentially everyone else in the plane. Like the airlines run on first class tickets, and you get to fly coach because of them. And a little bit, it's the same way.
And some of these, not all the patches, because some of them are so esoteric, right. That you're just like, well, this has no business being in the main branch, right? And in those cases, we will often work with the company and be like, yeah, guys, could you guys not do that? Because A, it's stupid, and B, it's dumb, and 3, it's really annoying.
So do you have to then do you maintain those special patches then over time? Wow.
Yeah, we maintain all those patches up until the point at which they move on, and that does happen. There's a military contractor that we were working on that had patches that we gave him probably about 7 years ago, and then finally they've moved completely to the cloud. The patches were required because they were running in a very strange on-prem environment that was just, things were not talking to each other in the proper way. They had it set up in a way that just didn't, like, the file system was not being recognized correctly, and on our end we're like, why? Like, what advantage does it give you? What maniac decided that was how you were going to set it up? They're like, well, that's just the way that we've run for years, and so we said, all right, well, okay, yeah, I guess we'll patch it so that it works. And we did, and we maintained that for probably 6-7 years, and then they finally moved over completely to the cloud. That problem disappears, that patch goes away, and we're golden. And but that was a long.
And all your regression testing on all those patches as well.
This is why regression. Yeah, people wonder, like, why does it take you guys so long? It's like, yeah, we have. It's complicated, man. There's 100 and something third-party libraries that we all have to test. There's a weird customized Tomcat. There's all these custom patches. There's the potential that what you're running on doesn't have the latest hotfix or right? Like we don't want to, if you've decided that you don't want to run the latest hotfix and it's not a security patch, so maybe for whatever reason you don't want to do that, and it breaks, that's bad, right? like we can't have that. So we need to test all of those things on Linux, on Windows, like multiple Linuxes, the Linuxes that are certified, like we have to go through all that. So yeah, it's not trivial. Anybody who thinks creating a development ecosystem is easy, good luck. Have fun with that. So
so on the evangelism front, I mean, this is what people should be talking to the companies about. Like, hey, if you think you're going to switch, look, it's not. Ben and I, when we talked about your presentation in the beginning, we talked about his company, how they tried that and what they ended up having to go through, years in the making.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing. I've talked to other partners.
And there's still ColdFusion running.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to our partner RIS, and their development house, they work with companies, and they're like, yeah, this is a conversation they have all the time with people. And it's like, look, it's not as easy as you think. It's going to take 2 to 4 times as long as you think it's going to take. And at the same time, what are you not doing during that time period that you're now allowing some competitor to come in and swoop up because you decided you wanted to rewrite the software because of some small reason? I mean, the opportunity cost is huge, and that's a piece that a lot of people miss. Is okay, hey, yeah, it may make somebody happy, some new CTO that came on board, but
who wants to make an impact.
Yeah. But now the sales director, look, we're frozen for 3 years, no new features. That's impacting the business. We got to really look at that.
Inevitably, you'll end up in a situation where they cannot get rid of ColdFusion. That happened to that company that I came in, that I was supposed to move everything over, and bottom line was, like, some of their custom installs were just simply too complicated to move to a full SaaS. So now you're maintaining 2 different languages, 2 different code sets, where you used to just be using one. I mean, there's been talk at that company of moving everything back to ColdFusion. It would simplify it by 100%, right?
Oh my God, it's amazing.
It's wild. It's madness. But that's kind of how it goes. I actually have a fun story from I was hired to come in and do a little bit of fixing. That used to be my job. I was a fixer at the university, where, like, they would just put me into some place that was horribly broken, and I would just have to figure out how to make things run. So I came into this financial aid office, and it was just a mess. Like, they lost their entire staff, except for one guy who was literally a veritable genius. The day I showed up, he told us that Google had hired him to work on algorithms for, like, efficiencies in storage or something. He was moving down to Bakersfield, and he gave us 6 weeks because he knew how it was really nice of him. So I had 6 weeks to, like, sit there and pick this guy's brain. But one of the things they had was a system that worked on scholarships for athletes, kind of a big thing in financial aid at a university, right? It was on ColdFusion. Nobody knew where it was. Nobody had the password. They wanted to replace it, and they're like, can you do this for us, right? And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do, right? And they're like, well, I don't know. That's your job, right? Like, figure it out. Jesus. So I hunted it down. It was CF9. And so I was like, all right, who has the password for the administrator? Because I needed to update something, and we don't have that. So I hacked it. There used to be a trick where you could actually overwrite a file in the administrator, and it would blow through, right? And so I did that. I hacked into it. I updated the things. I changed it so that it would work that season, because that's what they needed. They needed one more season of this thing. And then they blew it away and got rid of it and moved to a system that cost $280,000 a year and did 20% of what this system that was written in ColdFusion. And
not uncommon. That's the thing.
So common. It happens all the time. And I was good friends with the guy who ran that system, and he literally told me, he's like, if we had known that you that we could have hired someone like you to come in, I would have never started the process of going to this other system. And they are still using that system today, and they're still frustrated. They've updated it. It does about half of what the system did before. Still 7 years on or 5 years on.
Do people just not look? Because, I mean, there are people.
It's salespeople, man. Those marketing people are good at what they do, Ryan.
But no, do people just not look for developers? Because, I mean, there are many places out there where you can go and you can find CF developers.
I think there were a few different issues. I think one of the issues was that this university has a CIO that's very anti-internal development, and ColdFusion was on her radar. Like it was so prevalent throughout the university. There was a lot of bad code. I get it. Like totally, I'm on board with that. She hates me, by the way. Like she would hit me with her car if she ever saw me on the street, because I've been a thorn in her side for almost a decade. But that was sort of the reasoning there. Was her thing is don't build it, buy it, have someone else support it. And so they went out into the world. But the problem is, if you're buying a pre-made product, it's never going to do exactly the thing that you need to do. Ever. Yeah. You try to get as close as you can, and then maybe do a little bit of custom development through that vendor and get it done. The problem was the people who spec'd this out didn't understand what the system did because they didn't know where it was or what the password was or how it worked.
Amazing.
They had no idea. And it was fun because I was showing the guy, I was like, hey, did you know that you could do this? Like you could go in here and edit this yourself and do this. And he was just looking at me like a deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, I can't do any of that. That entire system, by the way, to update it required that you downloaded what was it? It was almost a gigabyte text file from like one server to another. I kid you not. It was the ugliest thing. And we actually, when we tried to use it, I think it actually was. No, it wasn't. No, this is terrible. It was a fixed width.
Oh no.
It was a fixed width. And so so we were initially unable to work with it, right? Because something in the systems that we were working with were breaking it. The width was getting broken. So what we ended up doing was writing a Python script that would go out, do all the ETL on it to like lock it into exactly the format that needed to be, because Python's really good at that. And then that Python would then stream it into the system and make it work. So that was another like 3 months of a development that I started. And then this good friend of mine continued because I went to a different department. He took over for me and finished that. And then later they figured out that they were able to do that in C# with a special library, so that they refactored it back to that. So not only were they spending nearly $300,000 a year, all that development had to be done to actually make it work on a system that was doing what they needed it to do already. So,
yeah. It's crazy. You have those camps, and then you have those who are, like, swear by it. And I just talked to VSR Systems, actually one of the case studies on Adobe site at one of our customers, and they're like, we couldn't have done what we do if it wasn't for the ability to develop at the speed of what ColdFusion allows us to do, and like having everything just built in. Like you talk about the CSV library that's coming out right now. All the other things that are just built into CS or built in CF that you can.
It's a lot of it's knowledge. It's just it's having the ability. It's a poor craftsman that blames their tools, right? Like Retensa. Retensa was one of my favorite speakers at.
Yeah, Jason did a great job.
Jason rocks. I love Jason. And like,
was that the Ben drinking game guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jason.
Every time he said Ben's name, he had to take a shot.
Yes. I'm surprised you survived that, actually. And they're a great example of someone that's been using ColdFusion for a really long time, but actually using it, like keeping up with changes, pushing the envelope, pushing the boundaries, and they have zero problems, right? In fact, he's told me we couldn't do what we do in any other language, in any other framework. We just couldn't. It wouldn't work. It would take too long. It would be too complicated, right? So it can work. You just need to understand your tooling and do the work that it takes to actually get there. So
if I can just for a second here see how the sausage is made from an evangelism standpoint,
Sure.
If just as a thought experiment, you wanted to register the domain name, like, should I use coldfusion.com? And all you wanted to do was take this presentation that you did and put it up as a slideshow. How many people would you as an evangelist have to talk to get the approval to do something like that? Like, is that like a 6-month project?
So
is it a 2-year project?
It's up there. Well, I can tell you. So there's two answers to that. There's the official answer, then there's the Mark answer. The official answer is you could probably spend till the end of time and they wouldn't let you do it. They may allow you to do, should I use coldfusion.adobe.com? And then it has to go through brand and it has to go through 15 different layers. And the Mark answer is I would probably just do it. And I would do it extremely well. And I would follow all our rules and everything to the best of my ability and make it successful so that by the time someone from Adobe figures out that I happen to do that, they'd be like, oh, well, all right, but don't do it again.
Right. I think that's what, people forget that you don't exist in a silo, that you are part of it. And I don't mean you specifically, but I mean anybody who works for a company. You are a representative of the company as much as you are a particular role within that company, and nothing can just be done flippantly.
Yeah, I have to work within, for the most part, and you have to choose your battles.
Yeah.
Also, one fun thing is, I don't know if you know this, I own the URL adobecoldfusion.com.
That's awesome.
Personally, like that's my URL. And I bought that from somebody with my own, that wasn't an Adobe project or anything. I bought that from someone that had bought the URL years and years and years ago. A gentleman with the last name of Admiral, which is an amazing name.
That's awesome.
And so their idea had been to essentially have a company. They were in Europe and they had a company that was going to be doing a lot of Adobe ColdFusion work. Time went on. They decided to go a different route. They're primarily a Lucy shop these days and doing very well and growing that business. And it was just sitting there not doing anything. So they reached out to a number of people and said, hey, we have this thing, not really using it. I don't like, he wasn't, he was very nice about the cost. He was like, just pay me what I've paid in fees.
Yeah. And
we'll call it even. And so I did. I didn't get permission to do that. I just did it. Mostly to keep it out of other people's hands, but also because it's a very useful URL to have for.
It's a good property.
It's a good property to have, and that is now hosted on somebody's company. Nice. I won't mention, but and so it's up there. So I will do these things once in a while, because with that one, I mean, listen, I can buy whatever URLs I want. Well, to a degree, right? That was not one that I necessarily would get in a lot of trouble, unless, of course, I put something up there that was right. Bad, which I never would do, obviously. But it's also now turned into a place where a bunch of our own internal people can test inside of a cloud environment without having to deal with the extremely restrictive internal cloud environment problems that we have inside of Adobe. They have it locked down for good reason. That team has to, deal with a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. As I mentioned earlier, we are a unique development shop, right? Like we actually work inside of web development. A lot of these other teams don't necessarily have that background for the most part, right? So they have to be very careful. Like, do these people know like SecOps? Like, do they understand how to secure their stuff? Maybe not, but they can't take the chance. So they lock everything down. And for someone like me, totally useless. I tried very hard for the first year to make it work, and just didn't work. I couldn't open anything up. I couldn't have anybody outside the company view it. I couldn't connect to things. I couldn't install AMIs. So I just went rogue, and I started doing stuff kind of on my own, and it's fine. Like, you just don't be stupid.
Yeah. It's a fine line. It's a fine line to walk,
It's
you know, because a little bit you get judged on the outcome, not on the process, which is unfortunate, right? Because you could have done the same thing, it could have not worked out, and then, you know, you can. It's not necessarily the lesson you want to take away.
It makes me feel a little closer to the community too, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm kind of a rogue.
Absolutely.
I'm doing what's necessary, man.
Right. 100%.
It's a decent URL too.
It is. It's useful. I'm sure at some point in the future it will be used for something important, right? And I'm really glad that, you know, at the time I was able to get a hold of it. So
Well, let me ask you this, only because it feels like something that would be relevant but adjacent to the corporate site itself. So I know that there is I think it's called trycf.com, where someone, is it Russ Michaels who hosts that, where it's just like a REPL kind of, you know, you can paste thing in and say like, run this in version 2023 or 2021, and it'll just run it. Has Adobe ever considered owning a property like that? You know, you go to a lot. Oh, you do?
CF Fiddle.
What? Do I not know
Were
this?
you not at, oh my gosh, 2017 or 2016? We announced CF Fiddle. We have been running CF Fiddle for a long time. So
is it
the difference
cffiddle.org?
Yeah,
it looks like it.
Is it .org? Yeah, I think it's a .org. So
dang.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
there's no Lucy.
We'll just take this out and posting.
No, but you make a really good point, and something I guess I can maybe announce here is that we internally are really looking to leverage CF Fiddle a lot more for doing things like allowing people to try out new features, right? Potentially, maybe even being able to do some beta stuff on it if we can get around. Yeah, because, you know, like you said, like installing it's kind of a pain in the rear end, right? So if you could hop onto a Fiddle and make that work, now there's concerns.
That would be great,
right? There's security concerns, so we have to get around them. But if we can make it work, it's something that we would love to be able to do. But even beyond that, just allowing people to go on there, play with things, save things, right? It's a really useful and awesome tool that we have not utilized to, you know, a large degree, and definitely not to our best of our abilities in the past. And we're now looking to see what we can do with it within the scope of, you know, what we're allowed to. Now, on the bright side of that, that is run by a third party. Like, gotcha. we don't own it. It's not on Adobe hardware, right? So that gives us a little more flexibility with being able to do more of, like, you know, what we need to do with it. But it does make things like beta, as I mentioned earlier, a little more
challenging.
It's challenging. Yeah. We have to tread that fine line legally and for liability. Like, stupid things get in the way, like saving someone's code and then making sure that that code is in a place that's being backed up or in a place that's like locked down, you know, like that people aren't saving their API keys in it. Right. Like some of this stuff, that? I'm like, you guys, like, okay, guardrails are one thing, but if you're hiking the volcano, don't get near the edge. What are you doing?
It's day one stuff.
Right. This is table stake stuff. And yet we all know that one of the most fun things to do is to go looking through old commits in GitHub and finding everyone's API keys, because people do that. Yeah.
All right, well, guys,
that's a good one.
We are at an hour and 20 minutes.
I think we did good.
Okay. Can I have a fun announcement?
Do it.
Oh yeah.
Hit it.
You guys want a surprise thing? I am extremely thrilled and excited, and other words, I don't have a thesaurus with me, to announce that Adobe will be running a hackathon. With Adobe ColdFusion 2025 after the launch of the full production live.
So the non-beta version.
This is not going to be the beta version. This is going to be the real deal Holyfield, like full blown one. Yeah, that's going to be coming obviously next year, and it's going to be the very first hackathon that we've done maybe ever or in a very, very long time.
Very
with
cool
prizes and all sorts of fun stuff. So more announcements on that will come as the year gets closer to the launch, but that's going to be a really amazing and fun activity. We're really excited to see what the community comes up with. Essentially, it'll be what can you do creatively with all of the new features in CF25. We want to see the most exciting, the most creative, the most powerful stuff that you can whip together with all the cool stuff that we're giving you in the new release. So
now, are we going to start seeing those at summits as well?
Hackathons?
Yeah.
Possibly. So these guys have not done a lot of hackathons. I'm actually the one. So I'm running the hackathon. It's going to be my baby because I'm the only one who's literally done them internally. Most of these guys have just never had that experience. And so for me, a hackathon is different from what they see as a hackathon currently. This hackathon is going to go for like 2 weeks.
Right. It's not an in-person Mountain Dew fueled 48 hours of straight coding kind of a thing.
No sleep till Brooklyn
kind
of thing. Right. That's what I'm used to. Right. You show up, it starts Friday morning at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever. You sit there and drink Mountain Dew and Jolt and, eat Doritos until Saturday night. And then Sunday you present and then probably collapse into a heap.
Yeah. We're not 25 anymore.
Oh God, no, double that. But there's room for that kind of thing at Summit potentially. We would just need the space, and I am sure people would be interested. At minimum, what I'd love to see is a hackathon that happens shortly before, and the winners maybe show off their stuff up on stage, or maybe there's a special. Maybe there's a special session for the folks that got the top 3, and then we announce the winner later that day. Something, right? All of these are possibilities. I think I'd love to explore all of these things. First, we got to get this one out of the way and just see, are people even interested?
I'm interested.
Yeah?
I will build something. You heard it here first.
I want to see it.
CSV.
It's going to be a CSV.
I've done one in the past where I wasn't there much. I mean, I'm a very coder light as far as what I can do, but I come from a business sense. I could present, I could give feedback, I could say, "Hey, look, to make this a whole product, we're pitching something like we should have the dashboard for it." So so it's not just that one piece. Let's make it make it wider, and that helped sell it. Because it wasn't just, hey, we have a cool tool that does this. It was everything around it. I think that'd be interesting to kind of also pitch. So all the things that can go around one particular solution.
The best hackathon teams have programmers, UI UX people, product people, right? Like business analysts, like a full team. Because it's pretty rare that one dev changes the entire world all by themselves. I mean, obviously in the past in some cases, but usually those people are fairly exceptional and have done all of those things and are all of those things in one, really full stack people. But in these hackathons that I went to, these teams were 5, 6, 7 people, and most of them were not devs. Only our idiot team had 2 people, both ColdFusion. This was fun. So I did something for the FDA. Actually, had an ag hackathon because I worked for an ag division for the state of California, and me and this other guy, both of us multi-decade ColdFusion developers, decided we're going to build an app to track this bug that causes citrus greening, which is an awful, terrible disease. It's completely destroyed the citrus industry in Florida. It's more than decimated it. It's just basically dead. and this thing is now headed towards Southern California, and we're trying to track it and keep it from causing these problems. So he and I built this app in 2 days, and we were presenting it. Literally, the FDA guy stopped us and said, I don't believe that you built this app in 2 days. and I'm like, well, I realize I'm wearing a bow tie and a pink shirt, and I look like a clown. I get it, because clearly things don't change over time. But the guy like literally goes, I literally, he's like, I think you guys, like, I hate to accuse you of this, but I think you guys had this app before, and all you're doing is just showing us this app that you've built over months and months and months. How are you able to do that? And I dove in to an evangelism presentation on ColdFusion right there and then in front of the entire place. I just sat there and started teaching them about how quickly you can go through and use all of the different built-in functions for image, CF image, writing it to a database using CF query, right? And I showed them the code and how fast it was, how little code it takes to do all the different items that built this app. And at the end, we won 4th place. The first 2 places didn't even have a running app. They had really good ideas. I know that was very frustrating for me. But afterwards, the FDA came to us and said, we're really interested in this ColdFusion thing. Can you guys tell us more about it? And they ended up becoming customers. Like, this is 2014 or something, right? This is way before I was even considered, right? This is Alicia being the being the evangelist for many years at that point. But they are still, like, today, they're a customer of ours. And I'm hopeful that my impassioned plea at this hackathon had something to do with them coming on board and starting to build stuff out. But anyway,
that's what Adobe should do. They should fund hackathon groups to kind of show off that would be amazing. To kind of push the agenda of ColdFusion out there. Is that, okay, Adobe
like
says, hey, look, we'll get a group of people, we'll pay your airfare, your hotel, sign you up for this hackathon. You wow them with how fast you can do that.
What do you think, Ben? Do you want to fly around?
It's like a SEAL Team 6 kind of a thing.
It is. Yeah, I'll be
like
the business
esports
guy,
team.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's like it's like whatever the EA team.
That'd be fun.
Or no, I guess it would be like the Mountain Dew team.
Right, yeah, like the Red Bull.
Like the Red Bull team, yeah.
There we go.
We should get Red Bull to co-sponsor it.
There you go.
Well, no. Because it's so easy to do. You don't need that.
Oh, that's true.
We could get.
I love caffeine.
Good point. No, but it really does. It makes a really big difference when, it was hilarious to see, 7 people, 8 people, 6 people groups, and then us two schmucks. And they asked us, like, where's the rest of your team? Like, it's just us, man. Yeah, no, because we're enough. Darn it, we matter.
That would be so impressive. Adobe really should do. They, all kidding aside, that would be pretty cool to have all these hackathon groups funded around the country to win these competitions or to place in the competitions and kind of show off.
Brilliant idea, right? That's why they pay you the big bucks.
There we go. I got the shortest title. What can I say?
The shortest title.
All right, so on we'll close out a great point to kind of close out on the evangelism is kind of those grassroots. And so if you're out there and you don't have to have Adobe sponsor you can do it on your own, as Mark did back in the day. You can go out, do a hackathon, and kind of spread the word when using ColdFusion and kind of show off everything. So there we go, guys. Grassroots evangelism right there for you.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Let's change the world.
All right, Mark, great announcement of the hackathon coming up. Ben, always a pleasure speaking with you.
Absolutely.
And now I have to up my game for next week as far as what I'm going to do for the opening. So I got to keep raising that bar. All right, guys, thank you very much. And we can't wait for the beta, Mark. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Cheers.